Hello, and welcome to an episode that talks about social media and online activism. I'm Swati Singh, a media professional for the last 12 years, specialized in mass communication. I have worked as a media professional with the Hindustan Times, the Indian Express, Career Launches, the Times of India, etc. And I've also taught digital and social media in various universities and colleges, including the Delhi University. In today's episode, we will discuss a very interesting and new way of making a difference to the society, and that is by use of the internet. Yes, we are referring to online activism and use of social media for the same. As the world is getting more connected, more opportunities to make a difference online are getting generated. With social media on our side, we can use it as a tool to make our voices heard. Today, we shall discuss the power and impact that social media, online activism can cause. So, now let's start by discussing the objectives of this episode. The objectives of this lesson include to understand the term social media activism, to learn about the functions of the social media activism, to understand the roles and functions of social media activism, to learn about the tools used for social media activism, to learn about Slacktivism, to learn about how social media can provide high impact at low cost, to learn about the pros and cons of social media activism. So let's start with the introduction. Until recently, research in the political science field and in social movement studies has little to say about the precise role of communication and communicative practices in the construction of collective identities and protest movements, the sustainability or the development and spread of contentious politics. This is surprising as communication and mediation can be positioned as a pivotal component in a wide variety of mobilizations and struggles throughout history. A social movement is a social process through which collective actors articulate their interests, voice grievances and critiques, and propose solutions to identify problems by engaging in a variety of collective actions. These movements have three features. Firstly, they are conflictual and have clear identified. Second, ideological opponents. And third, they are structured through dense information networks, and they are generated towards developing, sustaining and sharing collective identities. The emergence of the digital network technologies has led to the convergence of the channels of distribution and communication formats, including social media. The profound impact of network technologies on the society, economic, social and politically, has led to claim that we have entered a new era of information. Network or knowledge society, the emergence of the internet has resulted in a polarized scholarly debate about the impact and normative consequences of the ICTs and social media. In particular, in this entry, ICTs are referred to as to include mobile communication and the internet, which support social media platforms. However, even skeptics of the potential of ICTs to fundamentally alter power relations in society acknowledge the opportunities for disadvantaged groups to self-represent themselves, communicate independently, and organize transnationally. Social media are playing an increasingly constructive role in organizing social movements and in mobilizing on a global level. A large segment of the literature in this area focuses on whether, how, and to what extent network technologies and social media platforms are related to the mobilization for and the organization of contentious politics, with an emphasis on the 5 themes, which are types of usages and forms of communicative practices, roles and functions of social media, networks, ties, and the relational, opportunities and structural constraints, and lastly, the online spaces as a field of contention. We start by discussing the forms of communicative practices, and research on communicative practices is concerned with what activists do with social media. A focus on communicative practices provide insight into the media and communication tools are embedded in activists' situated lives and how the actions fulfill both material and symbolic goals. Communicative practices provide opportunities for agency, and users of the social media have to contend with systematic structural constraints that impede or close down certain options. Practice theory is drawn upon to better understand how media and communication tools are embedded in the everyday lives of activists and how mediated practices are intertwined with the non-mediated mechanism and processes in society. Research on the use of network technologies by activists and protest movements situates itself in the intersection between social context, political purpose, and technological possibility. What is possible, however, changes over time as a result of technological innovations by engineers and from the way users appropriate technologies and embed it that in their everyday practices, retooling them to suit their needs and purposes. For instance, Twitter has not invented to coordinate protest events, but as a social constructivist approach, it's helpful in understanding that technology's innovation and practice is co-shaped by designers and users. Different kinds of web protocols and online platforms enable various types of communicative practices. The main initial internet protocols available to users include the post office protocol, the simple mail transfer protocol making email possible, Telnet enabling one-to-one or few-to-few internet relay chats, file transfer protocols to upload and download digital files, Usenet newsgroups, the precursor to online forums. These were followed by hypertext transfer protocols enabling website development and the World Wide Web. Weblogs, social networking sites, podcasting, voice over IPs, and streaming services complement these protocols, enabling additional practices. The capacity and the speed of network infrastructure has dramatically increased in most parts of the world, facilitating more possibilities and the experiences of immediacy. The internet, from its inception, enabled real-time forms of communication, initially restricted to text and delayed forms, providing user choices about when to consult, read, or view content. Web 2.0 and broadband infrastructures have increased opportunities for immediate, in real-time online interactions. In addition to immediacy and delayed interaction, a distinction is often drawn among one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many multidirectional communication. Social media are seen as convergent technologies because they combine these different forms of communications into one platform. In addition to the social media also blur the distinction between what are private and what are public forms of communication. Social media also enables few-to-few communication, which is especially relevant for activists and social movements. Chatting, for example, can take place on a one-to-one basis, but it can also be used to facilitate an online conversation between a few participants. Group communication through email list server is a common example, and voice over internet protocol enables cheap conference calls with a small group of individuals. Roles and functions of social media for activism. Now we start with the reasons that activists deploy social media and the roles and functions in network technologies fulfill for activists and social movements are also examined in this particular literature. One of the main differences in roles and functions that have been identified is between internal or the inward roles and the external or the outward roles. The inward roles refers to the organization's coordination, internal debate, and decision making, while the outward roles relate to the mobilization, recruitment, attack strategies, and the creation of alternative or independent channels of communication that contribute to a vibrant public sphere. 8 core logics for the use of social media by protest movements and activists can be identified. ICT supported communicative practices are to organize, internally recruit and network, to mobilize for and coordinate direct action, to disseminate movement frames independently of the mainstream, and to discuss, debate, or deliberate, decide the ICT based communicative practices, to attack ideological enemies, to survey the surveyors, and to preserve the protest artifacts. Inward oriented communicative action relates to the potential of social media to make internal organization more efficient through the mediation of internal communication. The use of social media may lower the transaction cost of participation, which in turn potentially fosters recruitment and retention of the recruits. Social media are seen as being instrumental in enabling more fluid memberships and asynchronous participation, although this potential should not be exaggerated. Lower costs do not automatically lead to higher overall levels of political participation. Furthermore, the continuing importance of face-to-face communication for building trust and keeping information safe from state security services has to be emphasized too in this regard. Another feature of the social media is they increase the ability of the social movement to organize across the borders on a transnational level, to link up with other organizations, building large networks that overcome time and space constraints, potentially leading to the movement spillover. Social media plays an important role in facilitating the mobilization for and coordination of direct actions offline. An overemphasis on the internet is present in some studies in mobile technologies, as text messages often play a very important role. For example, SMS and mobile phones played a role in mobilization against Philippine President Joseph Estrada, leading to his resignation in 2001. This illustrated a substantial change in the political communication and mobilization in the global south. Lowering the cost and increasing the efficiency of mobilization and coordination with the view to offline direct action is one of the main features of social networking sites and smartphones, enabling on-the-spot or in real-time communicative practices. Social media enable activists and protest movements to self-mediate and to distribute movement goals or frames more easily. Social movements and activists have always done this. That social media are said to greatly increase the capacity to transmit text and visual discourses. It is often argued the social media potentially provide new opportunities for citizens and subordinate groups in society to bypass the state and market controls and the mainstream media to construct alternative collective identities. In addition, social media tools can potentially facilitate internal debate among activists. Online forums are mailing lists that are used extensively, and these tools are considered as integral part of many movements, to the extent that some have started to use online platforms and forums for discussion. Making this has been studied mainly from the perspective of how online deliberation has the potential to strengthen the public sphere. In recent years, a number of other roles that are related more to internet-based practices than to the internet-supported practices, that is, they are more constitutive than instrumental, have forcefully asserted themselves. The network is used against the network. Indeed, activists are using the internet and social media platforms as weapons to strike at their ideological enemies. ICTs are therefore being used as instruments of direct action, as the hacktivist tactics demonstrate. An example of this is the tactic of surveillance. Surveillance is the surveillances or bottom-up surveillance by the citizen activists on the state or public figures. Persuasive handheld cameras on the mobile phones used with networked infrastructure and platforms have made this tactic possible today. Source surveillance is the result of what Mathins calls the synoptic viewer society, or the many watching the few. The filming and photography of the police behavior during the demonstrations can be seen as a passive-aggressive counter tactic to monitor and expose police or state-sponsored violence. In this way, social movements transfer knowledge and can influence future movements through what is called as movement spillover. The protests in Tanzania spreading to other Arab countries such as Egypt, Yemen, Libya and Syria are an example, as is this rapid diffusion of the occupation of symbolic public spaces as a direct action in the Arab world, spreading to the indigenous in Spain, to the United States, the United Kingdom and elsewhere with the Occupy movement. Let us now discuss about the tools of online activism. The tools used by digital activists are vast and the list changes constantly in line with the rapid general evolution of technology. We start with online petitions. Websites such as change.org and moveon.org are hubs of online activism where people can communicate with others worldwide regarding their cause. MoveOn.org initially grew from a very small petition that two Silicon Valley entrepreneurs sent to some family and friends in the late 90s, asking for their support in telling the White Houses to move on from the Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky scandal to more pressing issues facing the country. Social networks, sites with high usage memberships such as Facebook and YouTube have proven beneficial in spreading a message, gathering support, shining information on a subject that might otherwise be overlooked by the mainstream media. Protests in 2011 in Tanzania and Egypt against their respective governments were in part organized and promoted via Facebook. Blogs. Essentially a form of citizen journalism for the masses, blogs provide an effective means of non-filtered communication with an audience about any topic and have been used in numerous online campaigns. Microblogging. Microblogging sites such as Twitter are used to help spread awareness of an issue or activist event. Twitter's hashtag function, which allows people to have their tweets contribute to a multi-user conversation by typing a keyword or a phrase preceded by a hashtag. It's used frequently as a digital tool for spreading a message. The Chinese equivalent of Twitter, Weibo, is subject to scrupulous government censorship. However, people circumvent this blockade by using code words when writing about issues that might be government sensitive. Mobile phones. Controversy surrounding the 2007 presidential elections in Kenya led to the introduction of Ushahidi.inc, a company which developed a piece of software that allowed people to send text and pictures of violence following the elections which were plotted geographically on a Google map. The software has since been used to plot activity in disaster zones following earthquakes in Haiti and New Zealand and flooding in Australia and the USA. Proxy servers. As a means of circumventing government interventions when it comes to the online protest, many people employ proxy servers which act as intermediaries between a user and a site, thus essentially circumventing national restrictions on any site. In 2009, student protests in Iran took onto social media to voice their concern over the contentious re-election of the President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. This led to a cat-and-the-mouse game of the government trying to identify which media were being used by the protesters to communicate, social networks and their eventually proxy servers, and shutting them down. Now let's come to the slacktivism. Slacktivism as a term is making a big difference. The power and impact of social media in the Indian context is clear to see and cannot be denied. However, experts have long argued about whether online dissent is actually useful and able to make a noticeable difference. Well, some assert that it is merely convenient and lazy act and does not actually achieve anything that sets out to, often referred to as slacktivism or a portmanteau of slacker and activism. This type of online dissent relies on users' desire to make a change without engaging with the substantial, tangible measures to do so. Through feel-good measures such as liking posts for a cause, signing online petitions, or changing one's profile picture to a certain color. Writing for the New Yorker magazine in 2010, at the cusp of the social media revolution, Malcolm Gladwell was very confident that the online activism succeeds not by motivating people to make a real sacrifice, but it becomes great by motivating them to do things that people do when they are not motivated enough to make a real sacrifice. In other words, online activism is high engagement but low effort and does not lead to much fruitful results beyond token solidarity. Its impact is not significant enough to attract people's attention for longer than an instant. Due to the shifting nature of the internet and the emergence of the social media as a genuine source of information, many still contend that sharing posts on social media is not the same as actually protesting in the street as part of a collective effort. In the 10 years that have passed since Gladwell's anti-slacktivism article, social media platforms have exploded in popularity. With their massive user bases, democratized nature, and capacity for information virality, they have become integral in influencing public opinion. Citizens often turn to them to educate themselves on social and political issues. However, the activism or the slacktivism we're talking about debate continues to be relevant in 2020 due to the shift nature of the internet and the emergence of the social media as a genuine source of information. Many still contend that sharing posts on social media is not the same as actually protesting in the street as part of a collective effort. But it is difficult to overestimate the power and reach of social media and the activism that is user engaging. In India, WhatsApp has become the most efficient and influential way to reach out to people in order to raise awareness and gather support for a cause. The messaging app has become infamous for being the purveyor of inaccurate and politically charged information, allowing users to forward this information to thousands of others. While it may not promote a strong sense of collectivism as Gladwell's envisioned it, social media is absolutely instrumental in removing barriers to credibility and allowing greater access to information. Does social media lead to low effort, high impact? Well, online activism is often seen in a very Western centric way. The impact it has in the West, where stable democracy is taken for granted, is completely different to the way social media is used and mobilized in other parts of the world. Certain scholars disagree with the assumption that online activism is lazy and convenient. These scholars maintain that the social media are not a panacea to the political, economic and social problems of plaguing the region, but are potentially powerful tools for organizing, mobilizing, communicating and putting domestic issues on the international agenda. While the use of social media is significant, what matters more is that the human effort that goes into mobilizing people on such large platforms and using it to one's advantage. In states where conventional media is manipulated by the ruling government, social media acts as a venue to circumvent the propaganda of the state-controlled traditional media and ensure that multiple voices are heard. Media coverage of online dissent focuses predominantly on the platforms being used. But while the use of social media is significant, what matters more is the human effort that goes into mobilizing people on such a large platform and using it to one's advantage. Scholars also argue pithy reductionist labels like Wiki Revolution and Twitter Revolution attribute to a technology what is in fact the reaction to broad disenfranchisement and economic despair, along with disgust over presidential corruption. Also, let us understand that the online activism pros and cons. Well, before you make up your mind, let us summarize some of the main advantages and limitations of the internet activism first. Let us start with discussing the pros of the online activism. Online activism is cost efficient. It requires low effort from the organizers and supporters of a cause. Digital activism is democratizing activism. Previously, broadcasting a message was costly, so only relatively big organizations could afford to undertake a big campaign and mobilize many people. Social media has made it much easier now. Online activism is demonstrating the transformational impact of internet on the society. There are many examples of online petitions that have worked. As many viral campaigns can attest to, it is extremely effective means to raise funds if social media campaigns become viral. It generates significant debate and awareness among people. Clickivists and slacktivists who are simply sharing a link or a post or clicking on a button to endorse a petition often learn about the problems through this process. Some of them will later on find out more about what issues or causes, and many more end up become full-fledged activists. Cons of the online activism. Clicktivists are usually passive slackivists. Rather than activists, they demonstrate a poor understanding of these causes. So these are the people who just click the post, and usually they get involved only because of the hype of a particular social media issue. Online activism can become a hypocritical way of getting peace of mind when we know that we are not doing anything substantial to solve the problem we may be indirectly contributing to. Online activism has transformed the way social and political campaigners communicate their messages. Often messages are being overly simplified, and there is less room for public deliberation and exchange of views than in traditional activism. Although the potential to transform society is real, sometimes the impact of online activism is negative for society. For instance, terrorist groups and xenophobic parties are also using online activism to achieve their goals. Online activism can be misleading. Despite having a large showing of force online, democratic movements often falter. Clicks of supports and shares do not always translate into large force outside the internet. At times, activism is being banalized and being transformed into a sort of entertainment. Now let's come to the conclusion. The potential of social media is great, and its role in mobilizing opinions is far greater. This episode talked about not only the various ways in which social media plays with our privacy, rather they are tools which facilitate one-to-one or few-to-few communication, leading to a more coordinated and organized effort for social activism. And now it's time for a quick recap. In today's episode, we talked about the usage of internet in the social activism. We learned about the various tools used to give shape and meaning to the protests online. We also talked about the role of social activism with respect to the social media, and we discussed about the theory which refuted the armchair activist role and power to make a change, and believed the people who protest on social media are not only seriously involved, rather they are more organized and aware of the influence they can create through the social media. Well, that is all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed this session. We shall be back with more episodes on the new media. Till then, take care, farewell and namaskar.